Start to record this. Welcome again, everyone, to our tour of Dan and Banias with our extraordinary tour guide, Sharona Liman. We're so happy to have Sharona with us again on this, our third tour of the country of Israel. What a great opportunity for us to be able to travel around Israel with such an experienced tour guide who really shares details and information that a lot of it has been new to me, been fascinating. I've been privileged to have some interesting conversations with Sharona on the telephone between our meetings, and I am also writing about some of these things. Some of you may have noticed, including some of the information that Sharona has offered me from her experience in leading tours around the country and her knowledge of the archaeology, the sites, and being able to combine that with her understanding and appreciation of the scriptures. So without further ado, I want to welcome all of you to another tour with Sharona. And Sharona, all of the people are muted, so they cannot hear. We cannot hear each other right now, but we will, if Sharona leaves us some time at the end, have an opportunity for questions and answers. But anyway, let's give Sharona a warm round of applause and appreciation for her efforts and her contribution and really making these events so interesting, and we really do appreciate what you're able to give to us.
Thank you.
Please,
Thank you
Sharona.
so much. I thoroughly enjoyed preparing this. I enjoyed the hike that I went to Dan and Banias to take all the photos and then preparing the presentation. It is, we're in the middle of a heat wave in Israel today, one of the worst ever, scientifically, not only subjective feeling. And thinking about these cool springs and freshwater pools really makes me feel much better. We're going to be showing quite a few of quotations from Old and New Testament, and in most cases they're quite long, chunks of chapters, which I'm not going to read all, but you will see where the quote comes from. So those of you who would like to go and read the Bible later at length and rethink about the different quotations, you might want to take a pen and paper and write just where the phrases are coming from. Okay, so as David was saying, our journey today is to the north of Israel, to the very, very top, the border with today Lebanon and Syria, and we're talking about the origins, the sources of the Jordan River. The Jordan River has three sources. One comes from within Lebanon, the Chatzbani, and we have the Dan and the Banias, very close to each other, each one from a different water system, and they replaced each other along the years. And they're both situated on a very strategic point. Damascus is somewhere up here. Tyre is somewhere up there. Damascus, like Jerusalem, is an ancient capital that doesn't have access to the sea. In the same way that Jaffa is the port of Jerusalem, Tyre in Lebanon is the port of Damascus. It's the gateway to the Mediterranean. Between Damascus and Tyre, there's the Hermon range. We in Israel have only 7% of a very long range that is 2,000 meters over sea level. That would be 6,000 feet. And it's an obstacle. And in ancient times, and even today, you don't just climb up the mountain to go the other side, you go all around it. So going all around it from Damascus to Tyre via south You go by the foot of the mountain and you stay very close to the foot of the mountain, because if you go further south, this whole area used to be a swamp, the Chula swamp. It was a swamp until the 1950s, until the modern state of Israel drained it. So what you have here is a very narrow bottleneck, a way that everybody has to go through if they wanted to go from Damascus to Tyre. And this is a very strategical point. If you stand on this point, you hold the key to the road. And both down more view of the topography, you go from an obstacle of the mountain to the obstacle of the gorge to the obstacle of the swamp. That's why the road just has to be here. 2,000 years ago. Now, if you read the book of Joshua, we are told that the tribe of Dan was given the area of Tzorah and Eshtaol and Beit Shemesh, etc., like we see here. And this is this area here. The area which today in modern Israel we call Gush Dan, the Dan block, with the city of Tel Aviv in the middle and all the cities around it, the satellite cities around it. This is the Gush Dan area. It has the Dan bus company, okay? Only the tribe of Dan could not stay here, because as you see in this map, the Philistines actually control this area. The prophet Samson, the judge Samson, from the tribe of Dan, fought against the Philistines. It didn't really help him. Eventually, the tribe had to move all the way up north. This is where we see in the map that they finally settled, because they couldn't settle where they were originally appointed. Now, the record in the book of Joshua is very short. And they went up and they took it and they occupied it and they called it Dan, okay? Going to the book of Judges, we have a much longer record of the same story. Now, in this case, we have several chapters. The tension goes up. It begins with 5 spies that go out and scout the land. Where can we achieve a piece of land instead of the one that we're supposed to have and we can't? Okay, now they can't really settle around here where they're brother tribes. Okay, they can't settle inside the area of Ephraim, inside the area of Menashe, etc., etc. Now, going to the south would bring them to the desert. Going to the east would also bring them to the desert. So they go up north and they find this quiet piece of heaven where people are living in safety and at peace and secure. Oh, I would love to live in that country. And their land lacked nothing. And it was prosperous, okay? Absolutely a piece of paradise. And these people have no army behind them. They have no relations with other countries. They have no treaties. Or they do have treaties, but they're too weak or too far away. And they think this is the perfect place. And they decided they're going to take this city, the city which is called Laish. We know today that the Leshem of the book of Joshua and the Laish of the book of Judges is the exact same place. In Hebrew, they really sound the same. And they rebuilt the city and they named it after Dan, their father, the son of, it says here, Israel, the son of Jacob. Now, going into the nature reserve, this is what you see. Water everywhere, gushing. It's not one stream. There are so many springs there that the water comes from each direction. The water channels separate from each other and go back together. And there's so much shade and so many trees and the sound of water. Now, we have to understand, we're here in the desert, the Middle East, and even in areas that are not completely desert, like where I live in Kfar the Tel Aviv region, you have 500 millimeters of rain a year, only during 5 months a year, and then it's totally dry the rest of the year. Finding suddenly such a place like this that has a constant flow of fresh water all year round, no matter if the year before was a drought, This is a place that is definitely blessed by the gods. Whether your gods are the Canaanite gods, the rain god of Baal, or whether it will be future gods that we will see in our presentation. You really feel that presence of a blessed place as you walk today. I hope you feel the chill, the cool wind as I felt as I was walking through the nature reserve. Now, some of the plants, we're not going to do a botanical tour of two plants I would like to introduce. The first is the fig. The fig is the very first plant in the Bible mentioned by name. We know on Tuesday, when God created earth, he created all the plants and the weeds and the shrubs, etc., etc. That's day 3. But then we reach chapter 2, and we reach this story of Adam and Eve and the snake and the fruit of wisdom. And we hear about the fig, because when they eat the fruit of wisdom, they figure out that they're naked and they want to dress with something, and they grab the first thing that they see, and this is the fig leaves, which gives you an idea. Maybe the fruit of wisdom was fig. The Bible does not say apple. Check it out. Go to Genesis and check it out. Why do people think it's apple? Because of Italian painters from the 16th century. Adam, Eve, apple. Okay? It doesn't say so. So think like a lawyer. Think circumstantially. They stand by the tree. They take a bite from a fruit. They discover they're naked. They take the first leaf they see. So that's one thing. The other thing is, this is one of the only native trees to Israel that is wide enough to be used as clothing. If you know what an olive tree looks like, what a pomegranate tree looks like, okay, the leaves are so tiny, they wouldn't do the job. But the fig leaf is not perfect. 2 hours after you pick it, it looks like this, which means you would have to change clothing every 2 hours if you were Eve. So all you ladies that feel like changing your dress every 2 hours, if your husband has something to say to you about it, blame Eve. And that is why in chapter 3 in Genesis, God gives them another option, and he teaches them how to make their garments from animal skin. It's also very itchy. It's not very fun at all to wear fig leaves. So that's plant number 1. Another note about the fig, it is a symbol of living in peace. Okay? If you live under your fig and under your vine, and you can pick them slowly and easily, you don't pick all the harvest of the fig at one time. It takes about a month and a half every morning. You have to have peace. You have to be not at work in order to be able to take all your harvest. And also there's a blessing in the Bible that you can see here very well, that you shall be like a tree planted on running water. So this is definitely a blessed place. Another plant that we see quite a lot in the nature reserve, we call it in Hebrew petel kadosh. It is a sacred or holy berry. And this is definitely a Christian name. It is named holy because every leaf has 3 petals. 1, 2, 3. Okay, and the 3 petals are like the Trinity, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And that is why it is called petel kadosh, holy berry. And we continue walking in the path, and we get to the source of the water. Now, the Arabs call this place Ain el Kadi, the fountain of Kadi. Kadi in Arabic means judge. Also, Dan in Hebrew means judge. This is a very strange phenomenon. We know in many places in Israel that the Arabs keep the ancient Hebrew names, the ancient biblical names of places. They maybe mispronounce it. Here they took the meaning of the name and said it in Arabic. And that is one of our clues to identify that the place that we're going to is really the biblical city of Dan. This is, as you see here on the sign saying, the largest karstic spring in the Middle East. It is the largest spring in an area that is generally desert. Now, it's not one spring. It's not very impressive, the picture here. It's thousands of little springs that come together and at once create a river. Okay, there's not a little stream and then a bigger one and a bigger one. It's immediately a river. So I was having fun on my way to the archaeological site. There's this tree that is called Winnie the Pooh's tree, so I was enjoying myself here. Now we're getting close to the site itself, and we're going back to the book of Judges. So we heard about the 5 spies, and then they go back on their way up to Dan. They meet a place in a farm where there's a person called Micha, and he had a Levite living in his house. And this Micha actually hired a private priest. He should have somebody to perform all the ceremonies for him privately. He was very rich. Later on, when there's 5 people bring up the whole army, they stop again at the same place, at the house of Micha. And then those 5 spies say to all the others, you should know that there's an image and an ephod, okay? And there's a priest here. Maybe we should take them up with us. We're going to a new place. We want it to be blessed. Let's take ourselves an insurance policy. Let's take a God with us. So in a very intimidating way, they convinced the priest to go with them, with the idol, with the ephod, and they bring it up to Dan. So as they settle there, as they conquer the place, as they change the name of the place, they build themselves an altar, they build themselves some kind of shrine, a holy area, and that area stays holy and continue to use it all the time that the house of God is in Shiloh. We have to remember that that this is the time of the judges. There's still no king and there's still no temple. There's a temporary something tabernacle in Shiloh, and basically everybody's doing whatever they want. There's not yet a nation. There's not yet one strong leadership. And then after this period, we have 3 kings. We have Shaul, Saul, and David, and Solomon. And then again, there's a split. After Solomon, we have Rechavam, who stays king of Judea, the south half, and Jeroboam, I say it in Hebrew, Yerovam, who becomes king of the 10 tribes of the north. Now, he has a problem. The temple is in Jerusalem. So his people, his 10 tribes, might be loyal to him during most of the year. But when it's time to go up on pilgrimage to Jerusalem, to the temple, and they had to do it 3 times a year, and those of you who will join us on our next talk about pilgrimage, it will be during the Tabernacle Festival, we'll hear more about it. Then suddenly they will go to the temple and they might move their loyalty back to Jerusalem, back to Judea. So he needs to give them some kind of ritual replacement. And he sets 2 golden calves, one at Dan, which is the northern border, and the other one in Beit El, which is at the southern border of the northern kingdom, the border between Israel and Judea. And you have to understand, when we talk about the promised land, many times you might hear the phrase from Dan to Beersheba. That's the territory of the 12 tribes. It's a saying in the Bible, Midan ve'ad Beersheba, from Dan to Beersheba. Okay? What he's doing here, he's actually marking his territory. By putting those 2 idols, he's marking his territory from Dan to Bethel. And they appointed priests that are not necessarily Levites as well. So again, at the same site, we have holiness. A phenomenon in Israel, we talked about it in Caesarea as well. The minute holiness reaches a point, it doesn't leave. Cultures pass, religions change, people, but the holy spot stays at the same spot. And in our case, almost. So we left the nature reserve behind us and we stepped up to the mound, to the Tel of Tel Dan. And the first thing we see is the sanctuary, the area of the shrine. And what the researchers here discovered is a base to an enormous altar. What you see here, of course, the metal frame is reconstructed for us tourists to understand what's going on. You can understand the size of it by my friend Julia, who was walking with me, and she's going to be the model in many of the photos to come. Again, look how enormous it is. The priests that had to sacrifice animals on this altar had to go up steps in order to reach the top, in order to be able to hold the horns of the altar. Now, how do we know what this altar looks like? One of these horns was found in the site. I tried to look for a photo of it. I couldn't find it. It's in the writings, but I couldn't find a photo. But compare this to a much smaller altar that was found in Beersheba at the southern end. Okay, this was found dismantled. Sometime along history, somebody took it apart in pieces and put every piece in a different place. And archaeologists of today, like a puzzle, put it back together. And this is much, much smaller. It's about half the size. It's like these steps, but it has the exact same shape. So the one little piece of horn together with the one from Beersheba give us the idea of what this looked like. And behind the altar was a bama, a raised platform, an area, and this is where more ritual would take place. Now the name bama, the high places, is mentioned many times in the Bible, mostly in a negative form. You should ban the high places, you should stop using them, you should take them apart. And in many, many cases, those high places are mentioned together with a big tree. Tachat kol etz ra'anan in Hebrew, underneath an evergreen tree. And here you see this very impressive tree that always has this nice full shade behind it, right next to the bama. This tree is a few centuries old by the size of it. And you see till today, ancient trees get respect, most part, in Israel, and many, many holy sites of the Arabs, of the Druze, holy Jewish tombs have a very big tree next to them. So we have the altar, the bama, the high place behind it. Around this area, artifacts were found like this head of scepter. It shows leadership, maybe religious leadership. Fire pans, similar maybe to the one we saw from Magdala. These were the first ever to be found in Israel, way before the ones found in Magdala. And from a much later period, going to the Hellenistic period, we're talking about 700 years after Jeroboam, after Jeroboam, the Hellenistic period, they found this stela here that says in Greek, to the god and Dan. Once again, enforcing the idea that a holy spot stays a holy spot. Holiness likes to settle in one place. And we continue on our way. We leave this sanctuary and we walk on the main street of the biblical city. And we're walking on the original paving. This goes back 3,000, 2,800 years, okay? The Nature Reserve Authority had to do very little fixing here, very little additions in order to make it walkable for us tourists today. So as my friend Julia is walking here, as I walk here, we're walking on the same places that we can imagine King Ahav or his son Yoam stepping on the exact same rocks. And we leave the main road and reach the gate of the city. Now you have to imagine here a mirror reflection. This is the road, and one half of the gate is on this side, and the other half is on the other side, 180 degrees, and each half of the gate has 3 rooms, okay? So this is the gateway, 3 rooms on each side. We found such gates in many biblical cities in Israel, whether it's Gezer, Lachish, Chatzor, Megiddo, and there are more. Beersheba, just off the top of my mind. What are these rooms served for? Some of them are guard rooms. This is a gate. This is the weakness point of guarding the city. It's an opening. So one of these rooms surely was where soldiers would be sitting. Maybe this was a court. Gate is where everybody has to walk through. Okay, if you want justice to be done, you have to have it seen as well. So many times the court happened at the gate. And this is a place where everybody has to walk through. If you're lucky enough to get a hold of one of these rooms, you can have a shop. So these artifacts were found in one of these rooms. We're not quite sure whether or not what was sold here was the jars themselves. Was that the item or something that was in them? Because of course, they were found empty. Maybe these are jars of some kind of oils or wines that would be used in the ceremony if you were walking to the high place to see maybe the golden calf. Walking out the gate, you go down a zigzag road and you see another gate below you. And you do another zigzag and you reach the lower gate and you find this very beautiful pedestal, this raised platform here, just big enough for a big chair, for a throne, with these 4 stones with a hole in them. They look like upside down capitals. Right? And what the researchers think that this is really where a king would bring his royal seat. I don't know if you can see it because I have disturbance on my screen because of the share screen, but you see here at the foot of the canopy, which was above the throne, you have these stones here. This is basically the base of the canopy pole. And we know that kings in Israel would come and put their seat, put their throne next to the gate. Once again, like judging, because this is a place where many people have to come. It's a bottleneck. And whatever they do there becomes public. Hard for us to maybe realize today with the networks and the WhatsApp and the Facebook and so that today we sit in the house and say something and it becomes worldwide known. Then people actually had to say it where a lot of people can hear you. So the gate is a perfect place for that. And at this gate, the most amazing finding of Dan was found. Upside down, broken, in secondary use. In the beginning of the 90s, this slab was found. I think it was 92. A year later, they kept excavating and they found these 2 sections. Now, this is written in Aramaic, which is very, very close to Hebrew, very, very similar language. It's written in the ancient Hebrew script, and we can understand it, we can read it. And this is a victory stela that was put there by the king of the kingdom called Aram, which was based around Damascus. And the king of Aram, Hadad, boasts here that he had a grand victory against a treaty of 2 kings, Jeroboam, the son of Ahab, king of Israel, and Ahaziah, the son of Jeroboam, king of, and this is exciting, House of David. You cannot get more exciting than this in the archaeological world. This is the finding of the century, because the House of David that ruled Judea for 500 years, that we Jews believe that our Messiah will come from, that you Christians believe the Messiah has already come from, did not have any archaeological proof until this stone was found. A very, very key word in archaeology when you don't have scientific proof is the word yet. You haven't found the proof yet. Until you lift a stone and find and reverse everything that you know up to that point. So it's not David himself, it's his descendants, but obviously if there's a house of David that is known by the kings around us, the head of the house would be David. I'll just show you where it says in Hebrew, Bet Yud Taf, David, Daled Vav Daled. Now notice that the letter for D, okay, is a triangle, very similar to the delta in ancient Greek, okay? So if King David had to have a signature of himself and he didn't feel like writing David, he would take two triangles and put them together. And that's the source of what we call Magen David Ayom, the Star of David. It's basically David's signature. So this is a very, very exciting finding. And of course, it's in the Israel Museum today, one of the most expensive artifacts that we have there. And this, as I said, was found by accident. It was put upside down and was used as part of a pavement. So, Hadad, the king of Aram, boasts that he killed both kings. But if we open the book of Kings, we see that the Bible gives us another version, that Yehu killed them. Yehu is the person who ends the house of Achav, according to the godly promise, according to the godly plan. Now, the king of Aram stations his stela in a city, the city of Dan, where he experienced victory. He conquered the city of Dan from the Israelites. Later on, one or two generations later, another Israelite king, Yoash ben Yoachaz, took again Dan and brought it back to Israel. So maybe what he did is, well, he rebuilt the city of Dan, took that stela, broke it into pieces, and used it as pavement, maybe even in the ceremony. Look, they thought they were the victors. They thought that they were winning. We take their symbol of victory and we break it and we step on it every day. Perhaps, okay? But how do we understand the contradiction between what history tells us, this historical source that these two kings were killed by a foreign king, and what the Bible tells us, that they were killed by a different dynasty, but within Israel? So there's another phrase telling us that maybe it's all part of the biblical plan, of the godly plan. And it shall come to pass that he who escaped the sword of Hazael shall Yehu slay. Okay? So if you weren't killed by one, you would be killed by the other. This is two little pieces in a big machine that God planned in order to make sure that the house of Achav does not continue ruling in Israel, because Achav is considered the worst king. One day we'll have a lecture about him and you'll see that maybe he wasn't the worst king. I personally like him. Anyway, going out, we went out the inner gate, we went out the outer gate, and here we see another altar, another place for ritual and sacrifice. Why do you need another one if you have the enormous altar and that enormous bima in the center of town, and you have the statue of Micha, and you have a golden cow? Why do you need another one outside the city next to the gate? Because if you were traveling, you would want the blessing of the road. If you were returning from somewhere, okay, you would like to bless the fact that you have returned safely, and you do that at the gate. So we hear this, that there's the high places of the gates. This is a phenomenon that we know from the biblical phrases and also from other sites in Israel. Continuing down the path, we reached another very exciting finding here, very, very unique. The Canaanite city. Now, it says here in Hebrew, Sha'ar Avraham, the gate of Abraham. We'll get to that shortly. Okay, so this is the gate of the city. Before the Israelites, before the tribe of Dan conquered the place and made it their own. This is the gate of the city of Laish or Lishem. And as we go closer and closer to the gate, you see all of this is a modern ceiling to protect it, because the gate is made out of mud bricks. And if it would be exposed today, the first winter would just melt it. It was preserved all these years because it was covered. Okay, and you go closer and there are 47 layers of mud bricks. And what is the most amazing is that the mud bricks are here stationed in an arch. Now, if you ask most people in the world who invented the arches, a lot of them would say the Romans. We think about the aqueducts, we think about the bridges, we think about the roads, the Roman temples. So no, the arch was invented in Israel. They actually have two very ancient arches. They're about 100 years difference between them. One in Ashkelon, this one is in Dan. The one in Dan is the older, the senior, and we're talking about almost 2000 before Christ. Okay, it's a 4,000-year-old arch. Obviously, an arch made out of mud bricks is not that effective. And the people of Laish themselves, the Canaanite themselves, eventually stuffed it and put it out of use and built another gate in another place. And they covered the whole wall, and that is how they preserved it. Now, we know that it existed in biblical times, the city in the Bronze Age, because it's also mentioned in the book of Genesis. When Abram, and Abram is written here without an H, it's not Abraham yet, okay? It's before he changed his name, before he went up in his commitment to God, okay? At the very, very beginning, when he comes to the land of Canaan with his nephew Lot, and then there's a war going on, and he has to save his nephew Lot, and he has a war against a coalition of kings, and he chases the kings all the way, pursues them all the way until Dan. So if Abram was here and he pursued them all the way to Dan, 800 years, 1,000 years before King David, King Solomon, before Jeroboam, this would be the gate of Dan that he would see. Now, some of you are saying, oh, but wait a minute. When the Canaanites were here in the Bronze Age, the name wasn't Dan. The name was Laish or Leshem. The name was changed to Dan many centuries later. You are right. And sometimes in the Bible, things that are late are mentioned early, and things that are early are mentioned late. And we will not go into all that discussion because that's too complicated for us. But if you noticed it, you're absolutely right. Just one last glance at the view. We see the Hermon mountain in the background. We see how close we are to the Hermon. Once again, this is the Hermon. The springs are over here. So this is the only piece of land between the mountain and the water that we can walk through and have a highway. And in order to go back to the gate, we have to go through the wading pool, which is the most fun area of the Dan Nature Reserve. The one place that we're allowed into the water. The water is 7 degrees centigrade. It is very close to freezing. Do the math in Fahrenheit. I'm sorry, I can't help you there. But it's very, very close to freezing. And this is what people in Israel want to feel in the days that we are going through now when it's 40 and above. So we're going to bid farewell from Dan and go to Banias, just about a mile up the road. What happened here in this case, that somewhere during the Hellenistic period, the point of gravity moved up the road. I kept saying that holiness stays in the same place. Well, it stayed there for many, many, many centuries, and then it moved a mile. And the holy spot and the big city and the strategic point and holding the road from Damascus to Tyre went a little bit to the east. Now, today we call this site Banias. This is the Arabic name. It comes from the Greek word Panias, the city dedicated to Pan, the half god, half man, half goat god, with his pan flute here. Okay. In the Arab language, there is no letter P. They just don't pronounce it. They don't have such a pronunciation. So every P becomes a B. Okay. As we enter the gate, very similar to Caesarea, we see a very big collection of architectural artifacts. The archaeologists here collected together, gathered to one spot, all the pillars and columns and capitals and everything they could find that they couldn't reconstruct, just to show us how magnificent this city was, how beautiful, how built and decorated it was, how rich it was. And a few more steps forward, we already reached the water, we reached the pools, and our destination is this back wall over here. This is the area of the temples. In this cave here is the source of the Banias, the second largest source of the Jordan River. Now, this is a photo I took when I was there about a month ago, and the cave is dry. This is a photo I took from Google, credit to Yigal Ashuach, okay, and he came here when the pool was full, probably after a very, very rainy winter. As opposed to Dan, which is a steady stream, same amount of water all year round. At Banias, you actually see the differences between winter and summer and between a drought year and a rainy year. But probably in the Hellenistic periods, it was full all the time. We know that there were tectonic movements, and we know that the spring shifted a few tens of meters down this stream, and most probably during those times, this was a steady source of water. And the place begins here. The holiness of the place begins here. This is where the first, not even temple, shrine, a spot of adoration to the God that is so connected to the nature, to the wilderness, to the forest, the god Pan. The first real temple that is built here is built by Herod the Great, our greatest builder of Israel, who dedicated the city of Caesarea to Augustus, was given along the time more and more territory. And to give his gratitude every time he got more territory from Augustus, he built him another temple. So there's the one in Caesarea, and then there's another one in Sebastia. And here, when he was given the northern territory, when he was given the Galilee. Now, what we see here is a very little bit of it, just the back wall with this niche and another niche here, very little bit, but we know what augusteriums around the world looked like, okay, and we can reconstruct the size of it. So this is on the left side of the cave. And then there's the cave with the spring in the middle. And then on the right side, as you walk along, there's a grotto of Pan and the courtyard for Pan and the nymphs. Next to it is the temple of Zeus. Next to that is another courtyard for Nemesis. And as you go to the very far right end, the temple and tomb for the sacred goats. So we have here at one spot 5 or 6 or 7, depending how you count it, whether the temple and the tomb are one or separate, whether Pan and the nymphs are one or separate, between 5 and 7 different temples all put together. This is one of the largest compounds of pagan ritual that we know, more than in any other place in the Greek world. Okay, so once again, the cave of Pan, the shrine for Augustus, the niches for Pan and the nymphs. This is for Zeus. This is for Nemesis. This is the temple and the tombs of the dancing sacred goats. And all of it quite impressive. And look right at the foot of the mountain. This is where the steep climb up to the Hermon begins. This is the spring of water. This is where the river begins. And you have to walk in the middle. Okay. As you go down from the temple area, you reach this nice rounded enclosure, always in the shade, that the Nature Reserve Authority built purposely for Christian groups. And the group can sit here and notice this shape here in the middle. They made it purposely, this hole in the ground, that it should look like a key. And you would see that in all these groups, you open the book of Matthew and you read this sentence here. When Jesus, when Yeshua speaks to Peter, and I tell you that you are Peter, and on this rock, and the word Peter, of course, means rock, I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not overcome it, and I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven. Now, this occasion most certainly did not happen at this point, next to all these pagan temples, next to the spring. We know for sure it didn't happen here. The Nature Reserve Authority put this point here for comfort. It is very close to the parking lot and very close to where everybody goes to. Many of the groups don't go on the hike that we will be going on shortly and won't reach the true point where this sentence was said. So let's go on that hike. So once again, we are following a stream of water with pools and waterfalls and the shade and the trees. And it really is, I could take hundreds of pictures here. I thoroughly enjoyed it. It's one of the most beautiful places. And I'm walking through and there's the cool breeze. And then we reach a point where we have to pass underneath today modern Israel's bridge. You see this cement building here, and the cars are driving above us over here. And as we pass this bridge, we see this archway over here. And this is where a Roman bridge, the Roman road, the main road from Damascus to Tyre. This is where it passes. It means that what engineers and builders took into account 2,000 years ago are the same considerations that engineers and builders take today. And they place their roads basically at the exact same spot. So we make our way closer and closer to the Roman road. We pass underneath the arch. And now we are at the place where the conversation with Peter took place. Because if we read carefully the New Testament, it does say that Jesus and his disciples went to the area of Caesarea Philippus, but it doesn't say that they went into the city, because it was a very pagan city. And I correct myself from what I answered somebody who asked me in the previous talk about Caesarea Maritima. Jesus has no interest in going to a city that is pagan. He lives as a Jew. He teaches Jews. He wants to fix Judaism from within. He still doesn't think about opening Judaism into a new religion or to the pagan world. That would come much later with Paul, beginning with Peter and then with Paul. So they go up there, I think, I believe, to hike in the nature, to sit by the water, to hear the wind and the leaves of the fig tree. I believe that's why they went there. They did not go into the city. So as they are on the road, he asks his disciples, who is the Messiah? And Peter answered him, you are the Christ. Okay, so this is the point that this happens. This is the point that Peter has that revelation on the road next to Caesarea Philippi. We're continuing our hike. We get to a flour mill. This flour mill is a few centuries old. The technique here is the same as in the Roman period, using the force of the water to move the wheels and to grind the wheat. It's 2-story high, and the water actually goes underneath here in the bottom floor, moving the wheels, which are connected to these grinding wheels here. And the flour that comes out here is very, very tasty. And you can see this would be the wheel, the kind of wheel that you would see on the bottom floor being moved by the power of the water. And basically using the same power of water when this area was under Syrian rule from 1948 till 1967, till the 6-Day War. So the Syrians built at the same spot. Again, engineers have the same considerations at the same spot where the flour mill is, for the same reason, a hydroelectric stations. And we reach a junction. Now, those who do hike usually continue down the stream all the way to the waterfall. The fewer people turn to the left to go see the Palace of Agrippa, and we are going to go up these steps and do the circular route to reach that palace. Now we have to understand who Agrippa is. Agrippa is the great-grandson of Herod. Herod the Great had many wives. Only 4 are mentioned here. When he died, his kingdom was divided between these 3, 2 full brothers and another half brother. He is the one that built the city on the same place where his father built that one temple for Augustus. He builds a whole city. What we know about Herod Philip is that his kingdom was very peaceful. He never left it. He took the Galilee and stayed there. He never traveled abroad. He never went to the territories of his brothers. During his time, there was peace and quiet there. He had time to build the city, to make it beautiful, to build the temples, to build the roads, etc., to mint coins. He would have a throne, a seat that he would take with him from city to city within his kingdom and sit at court with people. So it's a funny connection with the throne that we saw from before from Dan. Now, he didn't have any kids of his own. After these 3 die, most of the land of Israel is taken by commissioners, as we see here. And then a grandson from another child of Herod, Agrippa the First, gets the Galilee, and his son, Agrippa the Second, is the hero of the palace that we're going to go to. Okay, so these are just some of the artifacts that were found in the area. Look how beautiful. Look how many kinds of rocks here. You have all the limestone coming from the Hermon, and you have the basalt coming from the Golan. And look at the craftsmanship of this. You take the best artists, exactly like we saw in Herod Caesarea in our last talk. Now, this is the entrance to the palace. This big semicircle here, okay, is the shape of an entrance hall. You have some kind of atrium, some kind of like when you go into a concert hall, some kind of lobby before you go into the palace itself. And the gate is here on the right side. And 2,000 square meters. Again, I hope you understand the dimensions here. I really don't know how to translate it into feet, but this is very big. This is one of the largest ancient buildings found in Israel. It is so large that it is under two sides of the road today. So as we go through this tunnel, which was an original drainage of Agrippa's palace, and the arch is built so well that the modern road is over it today. So I walked through here, through the tunnel, and you can see the car passing right over the antiquities. They are built so strongly and so well. And this city hosted Vespasian. Vespasian was the Roman commander who came to crush the Great Revolt, the revolt of the Jews against the Romans that began in the year 66. Now, Agrippa is the king of the Jews. He's appointed to be the king of the Jews. He should be on the Jewish side, but he was raised and educated in Roman culture. His benefactors were Roman. And he did his best to prevent the war. He was very friendly to Vespasian on one side. He hosted him for 20 days. On the other hand, he tried on the Jewish side to stop the fire and try to cool things down, unsuccessfully, as we know. Look at the size of the palace, okay? I just took a photo of one of the signs there, the excellent signs that we have. So this is the semicircle we saw before with the lobby behind it. This is the entrance. The tunnel that we went through is underneath this entrance. And looking from afar, we see that inside the palace, there was this big courtyard with chambers all around it. Well, as we walk in, we reach this courtyard with the chambers around it. They might have been different rooms for guests. They might have been storage rooms. This is a capital of a kingdom. He might have had stocks of wheat and wine and barley and olive oil in these rooms around. And the courtyard, there's a space in the middle. Many centuries later, during the Crusader period, 11th century, okay, the city moved, we're not going to go into it, once again and again from the Christian Crusader hands to the Muslim hands, because everybody wanted to control the road to Damascus. So during the time that was a Muslim city, perhaps a synagogue was built in this courtyard. Okay, this building that has an apsis towards the south, towards Jerusalem, is perhaps a synagogue. And what the Jews in the 11th century did, quite obviously, is take stones and capitals and pillars from the Palace of Agrippa in secondary use. Going out of the palace, we are making our way back to the gate, and we pass the Cardo, the main road of the Roman city. Cardo from the word cardiology, the heart of the city, a road that was paved with a line of pillars on each side. Those of you who traveled Jerusalem, Tzipori, Bet She'an, other Roman cities have seen these kinds of roads. And we're almost at the end, and we reach this building that gives us an historical view of the whole history of Caesarea Philippus, of Banias. Now, I concentrated here on the Roman time, on the time that around Jesus, from Philippus to Agrippa, but the city continued on. So this wall here with the big stones, okay, that show us the force of a kingdom from the Roman period. Later on, Crusader period over here. The Ayyubim are the Muslims led by Saladin, who kicked the Crusaders out of Israel. Going up here, this is the Ottoman period from the 15th to the beginning of the 20th century. And this modern room here is from the 20th century, from the 19 years that the Syrians controlled the place. So 2,000 years of history in one building, a phenomenon that we see in several places in Israel. This is one of the finest examples. And we're almost back of the gate. And right next to the parking lot, we see the remains of a big Byzantine church. As the Roman Empire becomes Christian, Roman cities ruin the temples and build churches. And if they're lucky, something happened in that city that makes that church more special, more unique. Hopefully, some kind of miracle having to do with Yeshua, with Jesus. So what in this Byzantine church here, it is recognized by tradition. The Bible doesn't tell us that this is location. The Bible doesn't give us the location of the miracle of the healing of the bleeding woman. It could be anywhere in the Galilee, but tradition connects it to this place. And one thing about traveling in Israel, especially when you travel with the Bible in your hand, you do not argue with tradition. Okay? And not only that, that this Byzantine church is built on the exact location where it was believed that the house of the bleeding woman actually stood. And it is said about her that she was the one who was the first to build the statue of Jesus. Now look at this. The sanctity moved from Dan to Banias, a mile, maybe a mile and a half up the road. And in both cases, we see the matter of sculptures. We saw the golden cow, we saw the sculpture of Micha. In Dan, we come to Caesarea and we see the very first sculpture of Jesus. Of course, we do not see it today, but we hear the stories of it. Again, the story comes from Mark 5. And the last thing that we are going to see here is the remains of a very, very big monument, maybe a monumental gate. And when you think of a monumental gate, it's like the Victory Arch in Paris of today, the Victory Arch in Rome, okay? A very big monument here. Notice the heart-shaped columns. We saw such columns in Magdala. We know of such columns in other Herodian places. And this probably was the ceremonial gate that connected the city, which is back here, the Cardo, the palace, we saw them back here, and the temple area, which is on the other side next to the spring where we began. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is where we end our tour. And I'm going to stop this share. And David, if you would like to unmute people who would like to ask questions and remarks.
Yes. Well, first of all, I want to give you a big shout out here for another fascinating tour. Amen. What do you think, folks? Huh? I found it fascinating. Yes, I can see people clapping their hands. If you would like to join the conversation, you can unmute your microphones at this time. And we will have some time for questions. If you would like to ask, let me just kind of fix this up here.
Sorry. I just have to say that this time I kicked my kids out of the house and I locked the cat. Yes.
Very
yes.
wise.
Yes, and I'm quite proud of myself. I'm only 8 minutes over the timing, as opposed to last time, which was a half an hour. So I'm improving.
Yes, you did a very good job. Thank you.
Yes,
Thank you so
thank
much.
you. Many thanks.
Sharona. Before we get into some questions, maybe just a couple of announcements. First of all, Sharona, would you tell us a little bit about the next tour that we're having?
Okay.
It's
Sure.
coming all the way now at the end of the holiday month. Is that correct? And it would be during the Feast of Tabernacles.
Yes, you did not tell me at the exact date. We'll speak about that separately. But, okay, we're actually going to become pilgrims. Okay, till now we were tourists. Next time we become pilgrims. We are going on a holy journey up to the temple. According to the Bible, people of Israel have to go up to the temple on 3 major holidays, which are called in Hebrew regalim, and the 3 festivals, what we call in Hebrew Sukkot, which is tabernacles, Passover, and Shavuot. And in the biblical times, the tabernacle was the major one, the most important one. If you had to choose one out of the 3, you would go there. And in the time of Herod, the time of Jesus, there were the most Jews going up to the temple, and infrastructure was built in order to accept them, roads and hostels and water cisterns, etc., etc. Like today, when you prepare for a tourist site, you prepare hotels and restaurants, and we're going to see that road that people went along, and we're going to reach in our journey up to the gate of Temple Mount, and I'm going to leave you there in suspense because Temple Mount is a whole story of its own.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow. So that's exciting. That will be during the Feast of Tabernacles. I'll be announcing that. In fact, coming up now, I began actually today. We're going to be focusing in on the Jewish holidays over the next month with some articles. We're going to have some more Zoom events together to talk about the Jewish holidays, the biblical festivals, the important ones that fall during this fall season. So I would be happy to, have all you folks participate in that. I also like to mention that you can watch. Let's see, can I share my screen on here? I guess I can.
You should.
Should be able to. Yeah, so here's our site. So some of you may have noticed that up here on the left-hand corner, flashing in yellow, we have members events. And if you click on here, you can go back and you can watch some of Sharona's previous tours. They're recorded here for you.
I'd love to do.
As well as a discussion that we had about what's happening in Israel. I'm going to be doing another one of these about the Jewish holidays soon. Her tour of Caesarea and her tour of Magdala. And then Ryan, one of our English editors, also had. So hopefully this will get filled up now, and we'll have plenty of events for you folks to enjoy if you missed the live tour. All right, let's see. There we are. And yeah, so if anyone has a question, if you could raise your hand or give us some sort of a signal. Yes, hi Judith. You go ahead and unmute your mic.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yes, yeah, it was excellent. First, I'll say that, so thank you. But I have a question. You said that Jesus was just going for a walk with Peter, but how do we know that he didn't pick that spot to show something deeper, like the supremacy of who he was among all other gods? Isn't that possible if you're picking that location to ask that question?
Wow. Very interesting thought. Possibly. I just know generally about Jesus that he kept his distance from cities with pagans. He was very active around Tiberias. He never once set foot in it. He traveled around the land. He never went to the big city of Caesarea.
But am I wrong I had read that people would bring their small little idols, like little images, right? And they would put them in almost like it looks like a picture frame dug out of the rock.
Right.
And people were, if it wasn't a neutral area, but it was a spiritually charged area, and someone asked that question there, it could be intentional on Christ's part. I'm thinking, but I could be totally wrong.
It's a very, very interesting thought. I just think as a devout Jew, he would not be very close to the temples. He would be further down the road, maybe as a general location. But I doubt if he went close to the temple of Zeus or the temple of Pan or the dancing goat. It's so foreign to him, to him as a teacher, to him as a rabbi.
Yeah.
To him as he really believed that he is fixing Judaism from within. So I find it hard to believe that. But it's a very, very interesting thought that he chose this general location that had so much sanctity around it. I did not think about it. It does sound reasonable. It does. Thank you very much for that addition.
Yeah, I'd like to just plug in here a second. Yeah, Judith, I was actually thinking to ask her the exact same question. It occurred to me as well that this was a very significant area, and all of this idolatry and coming together in that spot, as Sharona kept telling us, a holy place. And yeah, I think to my mind, it seems that this would have been one of the considerations. And also, to establish on this rock, on this revelation, as I've always understood that passage, right? That Yeshua is not saying on you, Peter, but rather on the rock of this revelation, that flesh and blood has not given unto you, but the Father in heaven has shown you who the Messiah really is. Because that was an extraordinary revelation, illumination that came to Simon Peter. And yeah, there's certainly a dimension of spiritual warfare going on here between an area that was so dedicated to the idols, the gods of the time, and then declaring right there that you are the Messiah, the chosen one.
I can give a bit of
the Son of God.
I can give a geographical point of view, except for Egypt, where he had to escape as a child with his parents, and then returning to the land. This is the furthest he ever reached from Jerusalem. Okay, he lived most of his life in Nazareth, and then from the moment he is baptized, he travels mostly around the Galilee, around the Sea of Galilee, and this is where he's going north. This is the most northern point that he reaches, and from this point where Peter recognized him as Christ, this is where the last journey to Jerusalem begins. He went several times in his life to Jerusalem. If you look at the New Testament, and we'll talk about it next time, he was once there, and Tabernacle, he was once there, and Passover, and then, but the final time, the week of the agony, the week of the misery, okay, he comes there after he leaves Caesarea Philippus, after he leaves Banias. It's as if he goes to the furthest place geographically and also faith-wise, going to the place that is the furthest from the Temple of Jerusalem, having that selection of 7 pagan temples, reaching the lowest point, and then making his way all the way up back to Jerusalem.
Interesting. Very
Mhm.
interesting. A lot to think
Yeah.
about there. Thank you. Thank you. Sometimes we have to go to the edge of our own lives to establish the borders of our own identity and who we want to be and how we want to live our lives. There's always a lot of pressure not to do that. Thank you. Would anyone else like to ask a question? Or
Could I
make a
just,
comment?
can I
Yes,
just
Ann-
ask?
Yes, Anne, please.
Thank you. When would we know, and how would we know when the next tour is going to happen? Would it be just in the general Israel Today, messages we get?
Yes, ma'am. It will be. Are you signed up for our newsletter?
Yes.
Yes. So yeah, it will be in one of our main stories, right? It will be on the front page here. Let's see, what do we have today? We have a nice article from our editor-in-chief Aviel
So
about
much.
Netanyahu, and so it'll be coming up here, just like we had it here. Here's the tour of Caesarea here. We had quite a few. Every time, Sharona, we have more people signing up. By the way, we announced this also on our German edition, and specified to them that it would be in English, but there are many German speakers who also understand and speak English. So welcome to all of you.
Welcome.
From our German readers. Thank you for joining with us.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Hi, Marcus.
Hello.
So yeah, so Anne, yeah, you can find it, you can find it always here, and you can always find it over here on this little yellow spot right here that we just made for you guys.
Under members events, yes,
Yeah, the
thank you.
members event right there, and it will be right here. And I hope it will be up within, well, I need to decide on a date with Sharona. As soon as we come up with a date, we will post it. And it will be in our newsletter also, our daily newsletter.
And when you say newsletter, I
Yes,
get the
ma'am.
normal, I've just become a member of the Israel Today. I've become the member for the year.
Yes.
So is there an extra newsletter that comes as well?
There is, ma'am. There's a daily newsletter. You see here, it's on a number of places, but right here at the bottom of our site, you can sign up, and then you will get a newsletter every day, which basically tells you which articles are part of the day, and sometimes there's other information there as well. And so that will also be a place where you can register for.
Thank you. That's very helpful.
Yeah, thank you. Let's see. I'm gonna go over this
Sometimes do
there.
that.
There we are.
More
Good.
questions?
Yeah. Yeah. Any other? Michael, did you want to ask
Yes,
a question?
yes. Yeah, this is related to the prior discussion about the special nature of this place. And have you considered Psalm 82, where it talks about the counsels of God and the Ben Elohim? Michael Heiser and other writers have put forth the idea that there are places in the earth, specifically high places, and this would be one of them, reflected in the natural by the temples, but because of the supernatural reality that the high places were actually places of divine counsel by spirit beings over the earth. And so also in that regard, Jesus, I think near that place, and that same time we're talking about with Peter, there was the Mount of Transfiguration. So again, the idea of spiritual warfare, not only in the natural sense, but the very spiritual reality that these were very special places of supernatural presence by the Ben Elohim of Psalm 82.
Maybe I'll
Yes, please.
weigh in on that, Sharona. Thank you. So yeah, I think that, it's interesting. You also have Mount Sinai. You have the Mount of Transfiguration. You have this revelation. It wasn't, Sharona, this wasn't really, it was in the north, but it's not necessarily a mountainous area, or
It's down, it's at the foot of the Hermon. It's
right.
absolutely in a valley.
Okay,
Absolutely.
it's in a valley,
This
but
place, okay,
Okay.
generally speaking, most holy sites in Israel are, yes, on tops of mountains. And it makes sense. Again, we're a dry land, and are the main gods of the area are the gods of rain. And where you see the clouds are the tops of mountains. Think of the Olympus, okay? Zeus is also a god with lightning in his hand, okay? And the god Baal is the god of rain. So that's why you will find a temple for him on the Carmel Mount as well. And there are many, many stories how different mountains argued among themselves. A nice story in the Hebrew Midrash about how mountains argued who's going to have Moses get the 10 Commandments. And that argument, the Midrash actually says that the Carmel and the Tavor is the Mount of Transfiguration, argue among themselves which one is worthy to have the 10 Commandments given on him. And God tells them, you are all mountains and all of you have idolatry. And because Mount Sinai was clean of idolatry in the desert, and so that is true that most places of idolatry are on high peaks and high mountains, and it makes sense in the desert land to go to where the clouds are. Here in this case, you don't need rain. It snows in Syria, it snows in Lebanon, and because of the geological system, finally, snow of 10 years ago in the middle of Lebanon comes out of the Dan Spring. Okay, so you don't really need to pray for rain in Dan. They sometimes have a problem of too much water. There is a very sophisticated drainage system in the city to make sure that the city doesn't get flooded. We didn't get into all that archaeology, okay? So in this specific place, it is so blessed by God. Water is blessing. We're going to talk about next time, we're going to talk about the prayer for the rain, okay? This is the most valuable treasure, the valuable commodity, water and rain in this region of the world. If you live in Canada, you don't understand what we're talking about.
Fascinating. Gee, again, Sharona, you give us a lot to think about. So appreciate
Amen.
your perspective. Wonderful. Well, maybe we have time for one more question if someone would like to ask or make a.
Could I just make a comment there, David?
Please, John. Thank you.
John, I've made 6 trips to Israel mainly for hiking the wonderful trails. There's about 6,000 kilometers of trails in Israel. And the one that I've enjoyed the most is Israel National Trail, which begins in Dan. One of the most noteworthy things about Dan is the beginning of the Israel National Trail goes west past Banias and all 1,000 kilometers south to Eilat. Wonderful country that I spent some of the best years of my life there, or months of my life, 6 months there.
How long did it take you?
And this is the best. I've had 3 tours to Banias, and this is by far the best information that I've received. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. How long did it take you to hike the whole length?
I have not hiked the whole length. I've hiked many parts of it, but I've hiked about 2,000 kilometers in Israel because there are so many other trails that took me to interesting places. So I think I've only done about half of or maybe a third of the Israel National Trail.
Hopefully next time when you come, we'll do another bit together physically.
I hope so. I'm 75 and still hoping to come again someday.
Age is a number.
Age is a number. I like that. Oh, yes, that's good.
So yeah, I John, I was watching Sharona walking on these paths and inviting us to come up the hill and walk through the trees and onto the bridge. And I mean, it just gave me an appetite to want to join her on a live tour.
Yeah.
I'm hoping that, when we're able to come again and visit Israel, maybe we can set something up, Sharona. I would love to follow you on one of these hikes.
So would I.
Yeah, that'd be wonderful. Yeah, you've given us an appetite for, a deeper, richer understanding of the history, the culture, the context of the scriptures. That's wonderful.
I'm going to go back to earth now. Both my kids were kicked out of the house and their father's house, and they're waiting for my phone call to let them go back home.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you. Yes.
You've really made it so interesting. Bless you.
And I hope to see you all. In about a week and a half is going to be the Jewish New Year. So Shana Tova, Happy New Year to all of our followers from all around the world. Shana Tova.
Thank you. Shana
Thank you.
Tova.
Shalom.
Bye-bye.
Thank
Shalom,
you,
shalom.
Sharona. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Great. Thank you, Shana.
Toda raba.
David.
Nice, y'all.